I'm no different than you. It's just sometimes we need a helping hand or a guide to walk you through something to learn how to actually apply it in your own life. And then you could start doing it for yourself. And that's why I think the beauty of community is. We don't have to do it alone.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Webdelics podcast, where we're on a journey to find out the truth about psychedelics and plant medicine, to get rid of the myths, and to change the narrative. I'm your host, Scott Mason, and with us today is a very special guest, Aaron Mastny. Aaron, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Scott, I got to say, I'm super excited to be here with you in this conversation. And currently where I'm at today, I'm in Greenville, South Carolina. And what I do is I help people resolve generational trauma because I come from years, I'm 48 years old now, but I would say for the first half of my life, heroin addiction, sex addiction, pornography addiction, gambling addiction. I've been addicted to pretty much anything and everything. And I'm still working through things. It's not like I feel like I fixed it, but I teach and I coach people through what I need the most. So I found trauma work and subconscious work to be really my passion. And I'm very excited about connecting it to the psychedelic world.
It's beautiful, man. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Today's episode is based on a personal story that you've touched on, but it really goes as to one of the most fundamental conundrums about ketamine, the substance that we're going to be focusing on, which is that ketamine is most notorious as a recreational party drug. But it's being increasingly used for therapeutic purposes. And what I found compelling about you, Aaron, when we had our pre-show meeting, was that your own journey covers the entire experience. And we're going to share that experience during today's episodes, from using ketamine recreationally to using it therapeutically, and everything that you learned along the way.
Sure.
But before we get into that story, I do feel compelled to repeat the advisory that we state at the beginning of every episode, which is that this is a personal story. What Aaron is about to share is, as with all of our guests, his truth, and not necessarily the reflection of what we at Webdelics think, even if we do believe that folks should be able to share their truths. And I feel that particularly passionately about you, Aaron, because you have been through a lot. You really are trying to help people, and your truth needs to be heard. Aaron, how on earth did you start using ketamine and end up being a trauma worker, using it to help people who are suffering?
Yeah, God, there's so much to share, but my ketamine journey started probably 25 years ago, when we used to call it Special K back in the day, right? So Special K, we go into like these K holes, and I just used it as a way to escape my pain. And at that time I was even coming off of heroin after my best friend died, my first wife. It was her brother, and he died when he was 19. And we had to fly out to Salt Lake City, Utah, and I was standing there. The parents at the time couldn't even speak at the funeral. They asked me to speak, and I was just shooting heroin with him previously before he left to go to Salt Lake to get cleaned up, and he was only out there for about a week. And when the mom came back, I grew up with these guys. It was interesting because she said to me, she's like, I don't know, there's something not right, but she's like, Mark's spirit, was his name, came to my foot of the bed and said goodbye. like his spirit, right? And so I was 24 at the time, and he was 19. And I was like, no, I couldn't believe it. I was like in this denial phase, and I was like, no, I was like, there's no way. And so we called the father, and he was brought up Mormon. His father lived out there with his new wife, and he had, you know, two little brothers and a brother and sister. And we called him to go check out, you know, Mark. And so we knocked on the door, car was there, didn't answer. Next day came back, car was still there, called the cops, they broke down the door. And then Mark was sitting on the couch with a needle in his arm, and he had passed. He hadn't even unpacked his stuff. So at that point, it was like the worst thing that could ever happen just happened, right? It's like you hear all these stories of people ODing on, you know, suicide and fentanyl. I mean, but when it happens to you, it's like, or it happens in your reality, it's so shocking. And so we flew out there to identify his body. And it was one of the most surreal experiences where I was just totally in freeze. I was totally shut down. I didn't know how to respond to what was going on. And this was the first time when I saw my buddy kind of laying on in the morgue on a table. And I was like, man, I know my buddy, but that's not my buddy. And this is the first time I realized, like, I'm not this body. Although my spirit is housed in this body, I was like, I don't know where Mark is, but he's not there. It was just like looking at like a suit. It was like looking at something. It was like just like that wasn't real, right? It was just like a shell. And so this is the first time I started getting into the understanding and realizing, like, we are more than just these bodies. We are these spirits and these souls. Mm-hmm. And so when the parents asked me to speak at the funeral, I mean, I felt so guilty because I told him to move out there. So I felt like I was responsible. I took on the responsibility of like, oh my God, I told my buddy to move there and he died. So all I knew what to do in front of like this group of Mormons was tell them the truth. And so what I did was I just was like, listen, I don't think Mark meant to die, and I know he loved you very much, but I'm a heroin addict too. And I know that I'm in pain because I don't know how to deal with that pain. That's why I would do heroin. And so it's so interesting because fast forward to right now, as I just told you, we just moved into our new house here. I was going through my old journals, and I had a journal entry. This just happened the other day. Mm-hmm. And I wrote my experience of what happened a couple days after what happened with Mark. And one of the pieces I wrote in this journal was, Mark heard voices. And he was hearing these voices, and he was trying to get away from these voices. And his parents got divorced when he was 14. And so there's like, some of the core things I teach is like this lack of love and safety when we were kids creates this pain. It's not so much the trauma that happened, but it's the patterns that we pick up to get away from the trauma. Overachiever patterns, people pleaser patterns, analyzer patterns, perfectionist patterns, controller patterns to try to get away from the pain. And then they take over and we get stuck in those patterns, which keeps us stuck in not processing our emotions. So in this journal entry, I was like, Mark heard voices. He didn't know how to resolve those voices. I was like, I hear voices, and the reason why I used heroin was to get away from those voices. But when I got off the heroin, the voices would always come back louder and stronger. And what I didn't understand, which I understand now, is that we have these different parts of ourselves that we can actually resolve with the consciousness of where I'm at, to allow myself to move through the experience and give myself what I didn't have back then, which is maybe this lack of love and safety, which is trauma, feeling helpless. And so this is coming back to like psychedelics. Psychedelics can help actually go through the conscious mind, which is like the protective mind, like the conversation we're having right now. We're talking to like the conscious mind, but we have all this subconscious stuff that's happening. 95% of my reality is built off of my subconscious programming. And if we don't learn how to resolve the subconscious parts of ourselves, we'll just keep recreating these core limiting beliefs, these traumas. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I'm going to have to step in for a second, Aaron. There was a lot that you just said. And one of the beauties of it was that we could have a 5-hour conversation about any of these subpoints that you touched on that I'm grasping to figure out where to take the conversation next. So as the back of my mind grasps for the next question, Hey, I'm just keeping it real here. Let me just ask you the question that the audience is demanding to know the answer to.
Yes.
This I guarantee, which is that funeral. I've got to say, and I don't mean to make light of anything, I really don't, but I have never been to a funeral with a eulogy like that before in my life. You have to tell me and everyone, how did people respond to this? Seriously, that's, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, God. Okay, so going back to the funeral. So here's the fascinating part. I was brought up very in a Bible fellowship, very controlling religious place, and so my wife was brought up in the Mormon.
Yeah, me too.
Right. So you know how when those beliefs are imposed upon you, a lot of times you either succumb to them and you kind of surrender to it, or I rebelled, right? And so Mark was like, so I see these patterns, but I didn't understand them when I was that age. And so what was interesting was my ex-wife's grandfather, who was like the patriarch of the family. He's a doctor, very tough, very type A personality, like not accepting of many people, like very like harsh. And this is where generational trauma kind of gets passed down. And religion is a very interesting conversation because we do it in the name of God, but it's like, to me, it's like, is that really godly? Anyway, this man who was very non-accepting of a lot of people, because I shared my truth and I was vulnerable and I just put it all out there, he immediately accepted me. Like he was like, wow, even my ex-wife was afraid of me meeting him. And she's like, I've never seen him be like that with somebody. And it wasn't because I was trying to be accepting, but because I was accepting myself and I just shared the honest, vulnerable truth of where I was. Other people, this is where people, it's very interesting with our shame. Shame is like my interpretation of my pain. And we're like, we hide these things, we have these facades, so we try to push this stuff down. But what ends up happening is if we can actually be vulnerable enough to be with it, our own pain, we can have the courage to share it to other people, then other people, this is where our struggles is what actually connects us. It's our deep pain and shame. But the problem is we've been so conditioned to get away from it that's why we hide from it, which keeps us stuck in it. So I was received by everybody very lovingly. And at that moment, I stopped heroin, but I didn't stop my shame and my pain. So I just picked up other addictions to get away from it. But I did stop heroin at that point after I spoke at that funeral.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. That's all so powerful. And I'm really glad you shared it. Now, let's pick up on some other threads here.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the experience that you had growing up in this very controlling, oppressive religious setting. I myself grew up in a fundamentalist Christian environment. It was all about the fire and brimstone and hell and all of that. Now, I eventually, like you did, rebel. I also went through an acceptance phase when I was a teenager, and it was really fun going around thumping that Bible and telling everyone else how they were damned and all that.
I did the same thing. Wow, that's hilarious.
I grew out of it.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, right. Like I'm looking like a fool now, but be that as it may, you know, all of this is reminding me of a panel episode we had earlier in this podcast called "Psychedelics Saved Me," and there was a guest named Joe Apfelbaum, who grew up in a very conservative religion as well. And he talks about how the religious trauma combined with some other trauma that was associated with that as he grew up ultimately are what drew him into the world of psychedelics. If I recall correctly, I believe in his case it was psilocybin. So I have to ask myself, when we think about generational trauma, when we think about these controlling, oppressive environments that a lot of people grow up in the name of religion, we think about how religion itself is something that's cultural, that gets passed on. And then you talk about responses to trauma informing and driving maladaptive behaviors and thought patterns and everything down the road that ultimately cause these addictions. Do you believe, are you saying it without saying it, that the religious environment that you grew up in may have triggered some of this trauma? that led to the addictions, or were there other things involved as well?
Well, so I think what ends up happening and what I teach my clients and what I've learned throughout the years is like there's no bad parts. So darkness and light, we're all of it. So my internal hell, like, it's not like I'm separate from hell and heaven. It's like my choice of what path I go down is going to actually create my internal reality. So my living hell is when I don't allow myself to be with my pain or my shame. And it's like there's these levels of consciousness that I talk about, David R. Hawking's book, Power versus Force, where it talks about we come from full consciousness, which is a vibrational frequency of 1,000. And the lowest level of consciousness is shame, which I believe is like a 10 or a 20, which isn't bad or wrong. It's just dense. It's heavy. We carry it. And so when we're born into our environment, I believe we're this divine intelligence, and then these bodies wrap around our divine intelligence. Then all of a sudden we're hypnotized. From 0 to 7, we're in a theta brainwave state, meaning we're like absorbing all of the experiences of our parents and situations, our cultures. And so religion, being a belief system, is something that has been designed, in my interpretation of this, to help us feel safe, to give us something to focus on that's greater than ourselves. But what we forget is we're focusing on the external, and we're not, the kingdom of God is within. It's actually an inside out game. I mean, Jesus, if you learn about Jesus, I believe there's even missing books of the Bible where he teaches us how to put us into a healing state, which is divine intelligence. When you get present to it and you put yourself into this healing state, you can move through, heaven on earth can move through your body, but you have to be able to be present to it. So what happens is my mom, the way she was brought up, her father was a doctor and he was a people pleaser, and he, he did a lot of amazing things, but we celebrate these patterns of people pleaser, like, oh, let me take care of everybody else, but not take care of myself. We celebrate overachiever. Let me just do more and become successful in the name of success. But a lot of my clients, professional athletes, whether they're billionaires, they're dying inside because they're trying to get somewhere to get this validation of love, acceptance, and approval. But that love, acceptance, and approval is me giving it to myself. But if I haven't been taught, or I wasn't given that as a child, that becomes my illusion of me trying to get it externally. So religion, if it's not bringing you back internally and it's an external belief system, it actually could become another addiction for people to prove themselves to be what? Right. And the subconscious mind is designed to take the path of least resistance, so it's constantly programmed to prove itself to be right. So this is why there's war. This is why there's suicide, because people are right about their beliefs and they can't see the possibility that there might be something greater than themselves. This is where psychedelics can actually help people bypass the conscious mind that's keeping them stuck and go into the subconscious to resolve things within themselves that their conscious mind's trying to block them from receiving. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but does that help kind of like address the religion part of it?
Well,
religion can become a construct that actually can become a distraction, in my opinion.
but interestingly enough, when you talked about your experience of seeing Mark, when you identified his body,
Correct.
You realized for the first time that the body was, I think your words were, like a suit. And that's when you began to understand that the soul was something so much bigger. I will say, growing up in this religious tradition, I too had always conceptualized the soul as something that the body contained, that would leave the body, but was nonetheless contained by the body, or something that the body owned. When I went on my first sacred ceremony, the highlight, the universe-shattering revelation at the very end was that exact thing that you're talking about, was that my soul was so much more vast, so much more endless, so much more connected than my body. My body was, I don't know, just like a hair follicle sitting in the middle of the island of Manhattan. And the reason why I mention all of that is because that itself put the idea of being part of something bigger in a completely different context. I myself was just something a small part of something that was much bigger. When people use, or when you specifically use addiction to, in one way or another, block their trauma or to deal with whatever it is, when you talk about healing them through connection, presumably to something bigger, does this relationship between the soul and the body come into play when you think about what that something greater is?
Yeah, wow, yeah. So going back, and I love that you just shared that, because, right, this body, there's four inevitabilities in what I've learned in life, which is pain is inevitable. We all experience pain. Adversity is inevitable. Uncertainty, right? We don't know what the next moment's going to bring. And the last one is loss. Like, this body is going to dissipate. It's going to be returned back to where it came from. But my spirit, right? My full consciousness, my 1,000 vibrational frequency has chosen to come incarnated through this 3D body. And so as I'm going into, say, the fourth dimension, say you're coming from fifth dimension consciousness, it's the merging of the two. So as I address my shame and I allow myself, just like my physical body, if I twist my ankle, if I keep playing basketball on it, it doesn't heal itself. But if I put it in a healing state, the divine intelligence does it for me. I don't have to try to do that. The intelligence knows how to do it. My mind is a lot of times the thing that can block it if I'm not allowing myself to be with it. But as I resolve my shame and my fears and my worries, my concerns, the levels of consciousness starts to go up, meaning once you start to hit to courage, which is like a 200 frequency, something shifts. So I have the courage to now face myself internally. Then I can start to go to neutrality. Then I go to acceptance. Acceptance is a 350 vibrational frequency. When I deeply and fully accept all of myself, this can allow me to start moving through these sensations. The emotions are just emotional debris of the past or situations that get stuck in my body. But once I start to put attention towards it, it resolves itself. When I did a Vipassana in 2014, it was one of the hardest things I ever did, which was sit with myself from 4 o'clock in the morning to in the evening, no talking, no eye contact. It was a total inward journey. For 3 days, I struggled and suffered. I was like, oh my God, I'm totally insane, because I didn't want to be with my thoughts. Meditation was like foreign to me, but I was like, but once I surrendered to it and I just observed it, and then I just observed my body through a body scan, I watched and witnessed my body heal itself. And then I went into these states of like bliss and like unconditional love of like no body, right? I was like, and then the next day I was like, oh my God, I'm just going to enter into this place of bliss. But then there's that next part that needed to be resolved, that blocked me. So there's this expectation, there's this weird thing with the mind that's like, oh God, it's got to be this one way. No, we're everything. So when I can accept everything, the vibrational frequency of love is at a 500. So as I resolve the things in this body, I return home to my spirit, but I get to experience it through this body. But if I'm in resistance to the anger, the fear, the frustration, fight, flight, or freeze, I'm in resistance to my anxiety, my worry, my doubt, I'm in resistance to my depression, my sadness, my numbness, my disassociation, which were parts that took over when I was a kid, then we were robbing ourselves from having this experience now. So as I take my attention, my focus, and put it back to myself and start listening to I call emotions divine intelligence that's just trying to get my attention. I listen to my anxiety. I get the gift of it. It's actually showing me where to go. I'm now putting myself back into alignment with my higher self, and then I get to experience all of it through this body.
So all of that being said, and said with extreme passion and a level of feeling that really has hit me inside, I have to say, when ketamine first came into your life,
yes,
that's not where you were at. How exactly did it come into your life? And yeah, Special K, that's what people called it back in the day. Hey, what do I know? I'm only 26 years old. But before I was born, that's what they called it. I don't know how I know that. But in any event, what is being in a K-hole like for those who have no idea what on earth you're talking about? Does it feel like you, I don't know, or in that monster from Return of the Jedi that swallows you in, or is it something else?
God. Okay, so my experience with ketamine 20 something years ago was an interesting one. It was kind of frightening back then because I wasn't sure like this is like I didn't understand what was really happening. And then in 2018, I was going down a path of self-development. I was doing these transformational trainings. If any of you guys have heard of like things like Landmark Forum or LifeSpring, I was doing this thing called gratitude training, and I was on this path to become a trainer. I was like, okay, I'm going to be, because I had a very strong people pleaser rescuer pattern. I'm going to go save the world, which I realized is not my job, and that's exhausting to even think about. But I was on this path of like transformation, and I had a situation happen where actually got kicked out of a training group, and I was gonna go either trainer form, and I was like, or go to Burning Man, and so I chose to go to Burning Man. And so when I went to Burning Man, 2017, before 2018, 2017, I got back into psychedelics. And granted, I had not done psychedelics. I used to do mushrooms and psychedelics, acid back in my teens, 20s, and that was a very pivotal part of me working through some of my deeper stuff, because I let go of heroin, but I started doing psychedelics and started taking me into these different states of like spirit. I realized like I'm more than this body, and those were helping me get there. But then I kind of let go of the psychedelic part for a number of years until I went to Burning Man and I started getting back into them. And someone gave me some ketamine. And now my consciousness had, it's constantly, as long as we're addressing things and working through things, I'd done a lot of personal development work. So where my consciousness was at now, I was like, oh my God, we're this infinite love. And it gave me this like deeper sense of understanding of like, holy cow, like this is incredible, right? So I was tapped in like I never was before. And so then I got to this place where I was like, I'm just going to keep using ketamine. Ketamine is like, because it was disassociating me from my body, which I still had some things I wasn't resolving, but I had done enough personal development work for the past, because I used to go to meetings and Al-Anon meetings and Gamblers Anonymous meetings. There's a whole, in 2010, there's this whole place where I started like addressing my feelings and emotions, but I didn't really understand what I was doing. But then 2017 opened me up to this whole new realm of possibilities from a completely different level of layers of where I was from before. And so I would say I was using ketamine as a bypass though. So the challenge with the ketamine is it disassociates you from your body. We hold our pain in our body. So it puts me into a pure state of consciousness, and where my consciousness was at that time was, and continues to go up, in my opinion, is that it allowed me to tap into things that I wasn't really aware of before. And so, but I was missing a key piece to it. I was doing it as a spiritual bypass. So meditation can also be a spiritual bypass. This is what's interesting, like transcendental meditation is like I'm going into states of bliss and enlightenment, which I actually experienced some of that when I was in my Vipassana. But the challenge is if I just sit here and go into meditation and I'm bypassing this body, and I'm not addressing the sensations and the anxieties and the worries and the doubts and the fears, I'm not actually allowing myself to be fully integrated into this reality where I am. So this is a key piece. So when I teach a 12-week course, the meditations I teach are to bring you back to your attention, back to your body, back to the sensations, so you can start addressing them versus trying to get away from them. And this is where psychedelics can be a very interesting conversation with regards to people. Consciously, they can't resolve their trauma because they don't know how to go into their subconscious. So if they take a psychedelic and they go into their subconscious and open that portal, when they come back, their protectors, their inner critic, maybe their overachiever, they might start beating them up, be like, what are you doing, dude? Like, we don't do that. We don't go there, because it's been trying to protect them their whole life, because that's what they've been designed to do. So I didn't understand any of that yet. right? So I was just using psychedelics. I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is where you hear people doing like, 200, 20 ayahuasca journeys, and they keep tapping into that spiritual part, but they're not integrating it into, as a habit into the physical realm. They need the thing to get them where they want to go, but they don't know how to implement it in their day-to-day practice as a habit.
Very, very interesting. And that's a point I don't think has been explicitly raised on this show before. In terms like spiritual bypass, I'm not always sure that I understand, but you're making it at least get me to think that I understand, which is to be able to access whatever spiritual level you have and the possibilities that are associated with that without having to do some of the work that you need to, as I'm hearing it, to integrate with the body. And if I'm right, what I'm hearing you say is that when we were talking earlier about you using ketamine more or less recreationally, it wasn't what you really meant, and that I presumably just didn't understand, was that you weren't using it in a way that integrates with the needs that the body has in order to overcome the traumas that you were facing that caused you to need the psychedelics in the first place.
Yeah, I was missing a key component to it, because I believe, this world that we're living in, this 3D world, in this human existence, is we chose to be here to have the heaven on earth to come through us, meaning manifestation, right? So money, our health, relationships, as like the main domains. Spirit, like, it supersedes all of it, but I get to do it through this body. So if I'm not addressing the things like my taxes, as like one example, and I'm avoiding my responsibilities, but I'm using ketamine as a bypass to just tap into the divine intelligence, but I'm not coming back here and taking action because I'm still uncomfortable about the fears and the worries and the doubts and the uncomfortable sensations, I'm missing a big piece of my own divinity here on earth. I'm just kind of going and this is where it can get a little tricky, because it feels so good to go into those states. But then when you come back here, like, you go into this all powerful, like, knowingness that I am one with the universe, and you come back into this body and there's still all this shit, so to speak, that you haven't dealt with, your responsibilities, then you're actually preventing yourself from actually being that divinity here on this planet. And so what I believe we're doing, and we're all here to walk each other home back to our divinity, but we do it through this body. And the psychedelics can get you out of your body, which is where that's the part that can get a little tricky.
Yo, Aaron, that is deep. And I have to say, this is being recorded right at the beginning of the U.S.'s tax season. So I'll be thinking about this conversation the next time I see people on TV protesting having to pay their taxes. But that being said, at some point or another, you began to move in a different direction with your ketamine, on your ketamine journey. Yeah. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about how that shift happened. What it's meant for you.
Yeah. So I was using ketamine at that time, 2017 into 2018. I was using it for like 2 to 3 months, like every day. I was like literally I was using it as a way for me to tap into that consciousness, that infinite intelligence. And it was 2018 when, in February, actually right around now this time, they do a Burning Man event in Miami, Florida, in Key Biscayne, called Love Burn. And so it's a beautiful place off Key Biscayne. It's in a very nice setting. And so I was doing ketamine every day at this event, and something very interesting and profound happened at this event where, guys, I don't recommend this, but I used to do ketamine and ride my Harley motorcycle. I would jump up, I would do bumps of ketamine and jump on my motorcycle because I became my motorcycle. I do not recommend this. My friends were like,
yeah, I'm just gonna, we'll hear that story again, remind everyone about Webdelics, what Webdelics does and doesn't endorse. My jaw will hit the floor. And then, Aaron,
yeah.
and then.
Right. So my friends were like, dude, you're gonna die. I was like, no, I was using it so much that my body had built up a tolerance, so I felt like I had it under control. I mean, I was even at Loveburn because I kite surf. I lived in North Miami Beach for 13 years, and I was kite surfing on ketamine. So I was doing very
Wow.
extreme things on ketamine. Like I don't even know how I'm even talking to you right now in this moment. But yeah, but there was a situation. So I had my Harley at like this 1200 Sportster I used to have, and I ran out of gas at Loveburn, kind of just like cruising around and doing whatever. And so I had the great idea, like this guy gave me some gas. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go replenish his gas tanks. So I asked my girlfriend's girlfriend to come with me to the gas station about 2 miles away and fill up like 2.5 gallon gas tanks, and I put a 5 gallon gas tank in my kite surfing bag on her back. Okay, so imagine we're all dressed up for this event, and so we drive 2 miles to the gas station. We do a couple of shots of culotta, which is like we got ourselves caffeinated, and we did a bunch of ketamine because I wanted her to experience the motorcycle, because it was like I was like, you become the motorcycle. So we're driving back, and it's this beautiful, sunny, blissful day. Wind is blowing, sun is out, and all of a sudden the ketamine starts taking over. It's like this warm, like euphoric feeling in your body. And then she's like, oh my God, Aaron. She's like, I feel it. I'm like, yeah, you feel it? Like, this is like amazing, right? She's like, yeah. So we roll in back into the festival, and there's a fence that's like, blocking people from coming in. And I go to her, I'm like, is the fence real? And she's like, what? And then all of a sudden, like, I went into the matrix, meaning like I went into a K-hole. So all of a sudden the fence was no longer real, and I left my body. And so I blacked out as I was on the motorcycle. Right? So you can imagine I'm on this Harley. She's carrying gasoline. It looks like we're rolling in, probably to like bomb the fucking, like, complete disaster ready to happen, right? So I black out. I wake up. I'm on the ground. I have all these people around me, and I'm totally disassociated. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And everyone's like, are you okay? I didn't even have a helmet on or anything, right? Everyone's like, are you okay? Are you okay? And so I come to, and I open up my eyes, and I look up, and I see my friend. She's standing there. She has the 2.5 gallon gas tank. She's just standing there looking at me. And I'm like, Maritza, I'm like, what happened? And she's like, I don't know, Aaron. She's like, you were driving so slow, because I was in a K-hole. She's like, you were driving so slow. You put the motorcycle up against the fence. You stepped off the motorcycle. You ran forward. Then you ran backwards. And then you fell on the ground and passed out. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, thank God.
Wow.
I didn't just like completely just do whatever, who knows, right? This is the first time I went K-hole on a motorcycle. So, but the part that really was interesting was, that was the beginning of the festival, by the way. So I didn't stop. Like, my friends were now concerned. They were like, they tried to take my ketamine. I had another like half ounce of ketamine. So they were actually it was just like, it was crazy. That whole weekend was just this like I was just in an alternate universe. But it wasn't until the end of the festival that I was communicating with this divine intelligence in a way where it started telling me, like, Aaron, the drugs are an illusion. Like, what are you doing? Like, there's something more to do here. And I remember I walked out to the field, and I went to another K-hole, and I kind of like I couldn't get high anymore. I was doing so much to the point where it's like nothing was working. And then all of a sudden the divine intelligence was like, Aaron, like, it's time to wake up. Like, it's time to come back to earth, because your life is meant to help those that are doing what you're doing, which is bypassing. And so at that point, I came to this understanding and realization. I'm like, I got to just stop. I got to pause. There's a process I teach called the pause, stop process, a presence process. I paused, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to come back down to earth, and I'm going to start addressing all the things I've been avoiding. And that's for the next 5 years. That's what I've been doing since 2018, 19, 20. I stopped using all substances. I cleaned myself up. I started going down this path of just healing and just just leveling myself up to the next level. And it wasn't until this past year that my wife, we got married in September, she has a really strong controller pattern. So there's these patterns, right? She's controllers, like try to control everything to get love and safety. So she wanted to do some ketamine and get an intramuscular shot of ketamine. I have a friend that has a clinic down in South Florida, my Wholeness Center over in, Bonita Springs. And so we went there, and I was like, I'm curious what would happen if I did some ketamine now with the consciousness of where I am. But I wasn't doing it from a place of like, I have to do this. It wasn't a need. It was like, felt grounded, and I was like, and a lot of people, my friends were concerned. My mom was concerned. I mean, you can imagine, right? I was using ketamine every day for months.
Of course.
So even my wife's mother was like, Aaron, like, what are you doing? And I was like, no, I was like, I trust, like, it's in a clinical setting. I'm doing it with intention. I just want to see where my consciousness is at, because I just want to see where I go. And so we did 3 sessions. In my 3rd session, I went into this place of, heaven on, I got to experience heaven on earth. And I realized it was happening through me. And I was like, Jesus was there. Like, all this stuff was happening that was like, Christ consciousness is coming back through us. And so like religion, it's very interesting. It's like, Jesus is going to come back and save us. It's like, no, we have the same, all of us have this divine intelligence in us. Christ consciousness is in us. It comes through us when we put ourselves into a healing state and allow ourselves to resolve this deepest pain and shame that got passed on from generation to generation. So my work is really not to go save people. My work is to do my inner work, so then I could be a vibrational frequency to rise up, so then other people can be inspired to do the same. So your frequency can rise, and it's like a resonance. We all rise up together as we resolve the lower, denser feelings and emotions that aren't even bad. They're just trying to get our attention. And ketamine is a great tool to give you the experience of that pure consciousness state. But if you don't come back and learn how to process your emotions, you don't learn how to put yourself into communicate with your protectors or your patterns or your parts that are trying to save you, you will have a tough time integrating that experience, because it's like almost like it just becomes an experience and you can just go back to your old habits.
Well, I was going to ask, is it really even something that would have any true meaning at all, unless you somehow are able to figure out that meaning and draw it out without integration? Because what you're saying to me about the day-to-day ketamine use that you were engaged in before you went into the clinical setting is that it was bypassing, it was doing spiritual bypassing, and it was putting you in a situation where the underlying addictive behaviors that that had been haunting you your entire life were, from the sounds of it, almost being replicated. If you agree with what I say, and by all means disagree if I'm getting it wrong here, gets me to wonder then, how exactly can you be sure with regards to ketamine itself whether the integration experience that you have is workable, or going to be workable, or is working, or whether you're just sort of having just a feel better version of the quote unquote recreational or spiritual bypassing ketamine experience you talked about earlier?
Yeah, you bring up a great point. Well, I believe that if I don't learn certain skills or fundamentals or basics, which most of us are not taught how to be with our emotions, we're not taught emotional intelligence of, these fundamental pieces that I teach, I think it's very difficult. Yes, it's so enticing. I mean, we're so drawn in and distracted by trying to get away from our pain. I mean, life is one big distraction if you think about it. Everything is trying to take our attention to a certain degree, right? But all we have is our attention. But if I can learn how to bring my attention and focus on what's most important to me with regards to, there's these core states when I map out people's consciousness, like what we truly want, right? Inner peace, unconditional love, harmony and balance. We want this like feeling of okayness, like I'm okay. There's abundance. There's all of it's freedom, right? This freedom of expression, being free in all arenas of our life, so that we can truly be an expression of who we are. who I came down to choose to be, to resolve the traumas of the past, and then actually fully embody this body and be an expression of what I feel like my spirit is calling me forth to do. Now, psychedelics is one part. We're holistic beings. It's not one size fits all. So I think what happens is we go to extremes. We want to fix this. We want to get rid of this. We want to like get rid of our anger, get rid of our fear. No, we want to listen to it, pay attention to it. It's a part of you. Anger's not bad. Depression's not bad. Shame isn't bad. It's trying to get your attention. And so if I don't understand that and I'm using psychedelics to try to get away from it, you're never going to allow yourself to be with it. You're not bringing yourself back into wholeness because you're always resistant to the part that's coming from within. That is God intelligence that's saying, hey, let's be with this, and then you can resolve it, and then you could take your attention and put it towards what matters most. And whatever, most people want to, when they come to higher levels of consciousness and the different layers of ascension, ultimately it's like being in service, right? Like you do this job to be in service, right? It's the part of it's like your calling. And so that's that divine intelligence that's calling our attention.
I might be someone listening to or watching this show who is from a mainline spiritual tradition, or even a fundamentalist church, or I may be an outright atheist. I might be struggling with addiction, or my child might be struggling, and by child I don't mean underage person, but my adult child may be dealing with addiction, or someone that I love, a spouse. Ketamine may seem like a viable option for working through that, but is it possible for me to have a meaningful ketamine experience and an integration without buying into the spiritual perspective that you're talking about? Because that may turn folks off who need help, or maybe it wouldn't. I want to hear your candid thoughts about that, Aaron.
Yeah, so what I've learned is the wisest person is the person who you are. So it's intuitively trusting yourself to go down your own path. What can be confusing is when I say this to my groups that I work with. It's not what you do, it's the state you do it from. So if you're doing things from a state of fight, flight, and freeze, which is fear, right? So fight goes from irritation to frustration to anger to rage. Right? Biologically, there's something called the vagus nerve. Your dorsal vagal is coming from anger, frustration, rage. That's coming from fear, a lot of it. If you're in flight, where it's like, I'm worried to have this thing, or worry goes to doubt or anxiety, it escalates. Anxiety is like you feel insecure. Insecurity, anxiety goes to panic. It's like, oh my God, if I don't get rid of this thing, I'm not going to be fixed. That's a place of fear. So if I'm choosing from those two states to try to get rid of something, I might want to reassess, like versus like dropping back in your breath. And I teach this, and dropping back in your body, resetting your nervous system, which is ventral vagal, and you come back to this feeling of groundedness, and you tap back into alignment with your divine intelligence, and then being, is ketamine going to serve me? Because you're choosing, even though you're making the same choice, if you're choosing from fear, or if you're choosing from like acceptance within yourself, it's two totally different intentions. And if you go from fight or flight and you get even to the next part, which is freeze, which is biologically your body goes into feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, depression, checked out. This is where ADHD, I believe, is born, because when you're a child, if you're in fight or flight for extended periods of time, you had to go into disassociation to protect yourself. But if you're disassociated now and you're checked out and you're not learning some certain fundamental things, and you're using drugs or ketamine, I call them drugs, not drugs, but psychedelics or things to try to get like your way away from those situations, consciously you might want to consider learning some fundamental practices so that when you go into these experiences, you can really integrate them and take, because there's big insights, but if you don't train habits around the big insights, they just become like another like bypass. And then people are always, because it's not about, people were like so conditioned to be into the peak experiences. Like life is just this peak experience all the time. No, life is mastering the mundane. It's the day to day, how I'm being with myself. When I wake up, how do I be with, what state am I in? Am I in fight, flight, or freeze? We normalize these things. Most people don't even realize. All the people I work with, they just are stressed out all the time and they're trying to get something to get rid of it. They're lost in their own illusion. So it's not what you do, it's the state you do it from. But learning what that even means is like a whole, it's fundamental. Nature will help to heal you if you learn how to connect with it and put yourself into alignment with it. That's in the present moment. If I can't feel it, I can't heal it. If I'm not present to it, most people are worrying about the future. Most people are like trying to get away from their past. They're not present. They think they're present, but they're not. They're actually in a pattern. Does that kind of answer a little bit of what you're asking?
It 100% does. And it, as always, raises another set of questions. People who are listening to or watching this, I have no doubt, are going to say, wow, he's good at what he does. And his thinking about intention setting, which was a little bit beyond the question, but I'm so glad you went there because it's all interrelated, is mind-blowing and could really impact my experience should I choose to walk down this path. And he obviously worked in a clinical setting that was safe and had the appropriate facilitators there to help him through the integration process. But I might want to do this. How am I going to be sure that wherever I choose to go is going to have the quality of either what you're providing to those that you work with or even the quality of the facility itself? I really love some practical tips here because folks are going to be asking themselves this.
Right. So you're asking me, like, if someone wants to kind of start to go down this path, what could help them and support them with making a choice?
Right. Well, how do they know that where they're going is going to be able to provide them with the quality of the set and setting that they are going to need, that they're going to be safe clinically, and that they're going to have the quality of integration that a coach like you can provide?
Yeah.
Do you
Well,
just
I mean,
walk into some random, clinic on the street,
right,
or what do you do?
right. So, and this is one of the things that I'm passionate about. So, I did my most recent ketamine journey down in Bonita Springs at a place called My Self Wellness Center, and I think they're doing. In my opinion, they're doing it right because they help. They have someone there with you, integrating. I mean, Allie, who's my wife, and although I teach this stuff, she still had a tremendous amount of fear and resistance. Like she was, panicked because you can imagine if someone with a strong controller pattern who's been trying to control things their whole life to go in and let go is very scary, right? And so a lot of times even people that need meditation the most are the ones that resist it the most because they don't want to be with themselves. They've been trying their whole life to get away from themselves. So, I mean, if people want to check out, I have a YouTube channel called Being the True You. I teach the fundamental science parts of fight, flight, and freeze, and how we've been conditioned to go into these, what you said even before, maladaptive stress responses. So a maladaptive stress response is like, I'm triggered, I don't feel safe, and my mind speeds up and tries to get away from my body. When we pause the pattern that's keeping me away, the story, then we drop back into the body, we can start to reset ourselves. So those are some fundamental things that you can start to learn to apply within yourself. It's just as simple as coming back to your body and back to your breath to reset your nervous system in the present, which is making you feel safe. Most people, when they get triggered, they don't feel safe and they're trying to get away from that. And so I would watch those videos as a baseline understanding about the science, because to me, science proves God. It's not one or the other. It's not like it's all God and spirit, it's all science over here. Science actually proves the ability for us to resolve these things within ourselves. So logically, if I understand the science of what's happening, I'll be more likely to take action to do the things to practice. Like meditation, just like exercising your body, meditation's, depending on the meditation, that's what's confusing. There's all different types of meditation. I teach this, but the meditation I teach brings you back to your body. So I have a private group where I have all these resources in there where people can access these things for free. So learning these basic fundamental pieces, and then, finding a place like My Self Wellness Center, or, there's a lot of ketamine clinics that are actually, I think, shutting down because they're just going in there. There's a person in a lab coat. They're just shooting you up and kind of like, okay, have a nice day. I would pause and be like,
Yeah.
okay, where's the integration? So my goal and my commitment is to bring integration to these places, because it's so easy for it's the trend, right? Like, okay, great, like there's this thing that can fix you. Like, that's the illusion. There's not one thing that's going to fix you. You don't need to be fixed, by the way. You just want to be addressed and start to learn how to resolve. Like, one of the core principles I teach is you have the resources. Like, Scott, right now, your consciousness, you have experience, wisdom, insight, understanding. I don't, how old are you? You're what? You're my age, 48? How old are you? Is that something that we don't want to broadcast?
No, that's okay.
I know I
I'm
kind
older
of.
than you
Okay, all
by
right.
a day or
Well,
two, but
okay,
thank you
we'll
for the
leave.
compliment.
Okay, well,
You can tell me whatever you want.
okay. Well, so we'll just leave it at that. But you
Was
have.
that a flight or fight
I
response?
might
I
have
think
put
that
you
was
into
a
a
flight
triggered
and a fight
response right
response.
there. Yeah, you were like, oh wait, oh god,
I'm 56. There, it's
amazing.
out
You
there
look
for the world.
So you okay? So you are an incredible example of somebody that's I feel is getting younger with your age, right? Because you're embracing it. I don't know. That's how I feel. I feel like I'm getting as I'm doing
No,
this work.
I definitely feel that. I have to say, I feel like I'm getting younger by the day, or at least more buoyant in this world.
Right. So it's because it's like we're playing with the energy, and so there's four things. Usually, people like there's a problem. Life is happening to me. Can become a challenge. Life is happening for me. Opportunity. It's happening with me. Gift. It's happening through me. So when you start to learn how to move through your experience of these feelings and emotions, you have divine, like you have experience, Scott, where you can bring your level of consciousness of where you are now. And if there's a trigger or something shows up, you could take that consciousness into your subconscious and safely navigate it and give your inner child what it wasn't given before as an experience. And what happens is I do this with my clients. It's like advanced parts work. It alchemizes it. It transmutes the trauma, and then you give yourself as you disassociate from your trauma, and you associate into these core states of inner peace, of love that are already available, but we're blocking them because we haven't resolved the things of the past. And so here's the challenge also in a lot of therapy and coaching I see. Most people are like, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of times people, if you're just trying to coach the conscious mind, that's only 5%. We got to start working with the subconscious. So that's where I do hypnotherapy, parts work. And so we build rapport with the protectors, meaning they feel safe. Because if I come in and I just start to go right into your subconscious, your protectors are like, who is this guy? Like, I don't trust this guy. So, but I teach you how to access the resources you have right now, Scott, to go back and safely navigate and coach yourself. And then when you learn how to do that as a habit, you can resolve anything. That's where you become powerful, not powerless. That's real power.
If there is one takeaway that I would have then from all of this, it is the importance of understanding the addressing of the subconscious through integration with a carefully set intention, and of course a safe clinical setting when using ketamine, to be able to ultimately address these traumas without the spiritual bypassing that can sometimes appear to be healing, but really is not. Aaron, if there is one takeaway that you would like the audience to leave with, whether you've stated it before or not stated it at all, what would that takeaway be?
Yeah, so where I'm at today and what I'm learning to do for myself is to address the deepest underlying sensations, pains, shame, trauma, whatever it is, by just listening to what's showing up and being present to life as it's happening gives me the opportunity to address the deeper parts of within myself. And as I learn how to do that, you can learn how to do that too. I'm no different than you. It's just sometimes we need a helping hand or a guide to walk you through something, to learn how to actually apply it in your own life. And then you could start doing it for yourself. And that's where I think the beauty of community is. We don't have to do it alone. There's a core belief of I'm alone. Yes.
With those statements in mind, how can people find out more about you and become a part of your community? Where can they go?
Yeah, so I have the YouTube channel, Being the True You. It's under my full name, Aaron. My middle name is actually Yu, Y-O-U. My mom is Korean. She's from Hawaii. So I'm Aaron Yu Mastny. Yes. So my initials are I-A-M-I-M-U, Y-O-U, your own universe. So creating your own universe from the inside out. So you can go to my website, aaronyu.com. My Instagram is I am Aaron Yu, if you want to check out, I have content there. But really, the trainings, the free trainings are on the YouTube channel. And then I have a private group right now. It's free. It's called Being the True You. So if you hit me up on Instagram at I am Aaron Yu, I'll send you a link and you could be in that private group. I have a manifesting what's most important, free 27-day thing that people can do based on the most important areas of their life, their spirit, their contribution, their mindset, their emotions. And they can literally, I do activations, meditations, all that stuff is in there. And how I've been manifesting the things that have been showing up in my life in a very powerful way is by applying these things day in and day out, just making it a habit. And when we make these things a habit, all of a sudden, there's nothing for us to be afraid of. We can resolve it, we address it. We don't have to get rid of it, the fear, we address the fear. That's actually what's going to allow us to take action. And that's when we rewrite our experience, which creates new beliefs and a whole new reality.
That's beautiful, Aaron. Thank you. And by the way, if you are listening to or watching this show and you hit Aaron up on Instagram, please give the man a heads up that you heard about him here on Webdelics.
Yes.
Because he might just tell me, and I might just want to know about it.
I would love
Aaron, thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. Now, for those of you who are listening or watching, be sure to tell everyone that you know about what we're doing. And if you are listening to this on your favorite audio platform, be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. Put a thumbs up there, and we'd love to hear a positive remark in the comment section there as well. And then keep listening. We've got some exciting episodes coming up, mind-blowing, deep, and above all else, real. Then make sure that you follow us on our other social media channels, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. Go to our website at webdelics.com. That's webdelics.com. Then sign up to our blog for the latest trusted information about psychedelics and plant medicine. After you're done doing all of that, make sure that you come back next time for another episode of the Webdelics podcast.